the talk of Dr. Waleed, Dr. Mustafa, Dr. Waleed again, and Dr. Wael and Dr. Waleed. I've been there for 3 hours listening and knowing the buttons down there, because it's the second time for me on the Zoom, but a lot of buttons down there, and I keep playing with them until I came to my presentation. Thanks for the invitation, and let me introduce myself. I'm Dr. Magdi Moussa. I'm from Egypt, Alta University. I'm the chairman of the department. My specialty is medical retina and imaging. Today, my talk is about OCT in real life practice. Do we need OCTA in everything? Let's go through the presentation. I have no financial disclosure because I'm going to speak about the machine I have the good experience in, which is the Topcon machine, though I don't have any financial disclosure. I have the machine since almost 5 years, in September 2015. Let's go for a quick introduction to optical coherence tomography and geography. We all know that it's a technology, a new one, depending on measuring the movement inside the blood vessels of the erythrocyte inside the eye. So it's multiple line scans on the same point, getting any movement inside the eye. We all know that the only thing is moving is the RBCs inside the blood vessels. So it allows non-invasive visualization of the retinal choroidal vessels by detecting the erythrocyte movement. The picture on the right side, as you see, it's a depth resolution imaging modality. You can see multiple levels, though the machine will segment that in one by one level, but sometimes can get a movie having all the layers, and you can subtract layer by layer, and I think it will be in the future. By this, it will enable us to visualize three-dimensional retinal and choroidal vasculature. And this is the output of the machine. We get a line scan like this with all the layers, and I will show you one by one how the layers work. This is the first layer, which is the superficial capillary plexus, which is bordered by the internal limiting membrane, including the retinal fiber layer and ganglion cell layer. So it's up to the inner plexiform layer. Then comes to the second layer, which is the deep capillary plexus, which is bordered by the inner plexiform to the outer plexiform layer. And each layer has a color code surrounding the cube, as we can see here. The next layer is the outer retina. We know there is no vessels in the outer retina, so it gets black, and sometimes you see white dots like this because of the showing the choriocapillaris through the effect of the RP. And it's light blue. And the last one is the dark blue, which is the choriocapillaris layer, which is limited by Bruch's membrane and the choriocapillaris. So these are the 4 color-coded areas which the machine segment automatically and put it in the output, and we can even print it. And we can see the orange, the green, the light blue, and the dark blue. 4 layers. And this is like false color code, which putting all the layers together, so we can see the orange with the superficial plexus, the green is the deep plexus, and the choriocapillaris in the blue. And this is the output, as we can see. This is the output the machine can give you. Superficial plexus, as we see on the left side here. This is the first one. The deep plexus, which is completely different to superficial plexus. I can explain that in a minute. The superficial plexus looks like the plexus we see on fluorescein angiography, where the vessels is coming straight lines, then branching, and then making the surrounding capillaries of the foveal avascular zone. The deep plexus, we don't see it on fluorescein angiography. It looks like vortex or like a head, Medusa head, and then coming branching from it. So it's not exactly like the superficial plexus, it's completely different. And look at this, this is the superficial plexus inside the retinal nerve fiber and ganglion cell layer. If I click on this, and this is the density map, we can see the flow inside this area. If I click here on the deep plexus, it will come the flow inside the deep area, the deep plexus, and we can see it is like accumulation of vessels connected horizontally and vertically. Let's go to the lecture. OCT in real life practice. We all know that a lot of places have OCTA now, but not all of us have it. When should I order OCTA? Should I order OCTA in every retinal vascular disorders like artery occlusion, vein occlusion, diabetic retinopathy? Can OCTA aid in the diagnosis and management of CNV? We know that OCTA is used nowadays a lot in CNV diagnosis, not in the management, but in the diagnosis. Is there any situation that OCTA would be preferred or superior than fluorescein angiography and OCT? And can OCTA be the only diagnostic tool in certain macular disorders? We will answer these questions at the end of the lecture. In diabetic retinopathy, we all know that baseline we do fluorescein and OCT, which is quite good enough for diagnosis and management of diabetic retinopathy. But can OCTA detect changes we don't see by even fluorescein or by microscope or OCT? This is a patient, female, with diabetic retinopathy and her visual acuity 612, and look at the horizontal line scan. We don't see much of changes, maybe subtle changes in the perifocal area like hard exudate or hyperplectic foci, but there is no gross lesion over there to explain the 612 vision. So the OCTA is the clue in this case. There is ischemic macula. Though we used to teach the undergraduate that the first changes are microaneurysm, fluid, exudation, and then comes the occlusion and enlargement of the face. On the contrary, sometimes you get the earliest change is ischemia. And let me magnify that. This is the superficial plexus, and this is the density map. You can see how much enlarged the face because of the low flow in the perifocal area, or we can say capillary dropout. So probably this is the cause of diminution of vision in this case. So again, we can explain why the vision is affected instead of going and not believing the patient or doing further investigation. Proliferative diabetic retinopathy, fluorescein angiography and OCT is quite good enough. We can see here, this is a proliferative case with multiple NVEs. We can see here an NVE, NVA along the arcades, and diffuse macular edema, and it's proved to be cystoid by the OCT. But why the vision is markedly impaired? The vision is dropped to 660. Now, I can use OCTA in such cases to prove what is going on in there. So look at the superficial plexus. This is a 3 by 3 millimeter cube, highlighting the central fovea and the surrounding area, which is a 3 by 3 millimeter. And we can see how much ischemia at the level of the superficial plexus and much more ischemia at the level of the plexus. How about knowing the difference between the cyst, as we see in the picture here? Probably this is a cystoid, and this is the real ischemia. We will combine this with the ONFAS. So combining this with the ONFAS means that we can see where the cyst is, though the cyst can press on the deep plexus and causing ischemia, and where is the real ischemia is. So this can explain why the vision is markedly diminished, not because of the cystoid edema alone, but also because of the ischemia, which can be clearly delineated by superficial NVEs. And this is the density map, and this is the flow. And we all know that blue means no flow, yellow, less flow, and red is a very high flow. When I ordered OCTA, I had this patient, 65 years old female, coming to me with this fluorescein angiogram. She is very uncooperative, as the doctor did the fluorescein for her. She had media opacity, which is scatter, and she had this late phases because she had reaction at the beginning of the diet. So I can say that this is a proliferative with NVD and NVEs, but I cannot delineate how much ischemia in there. Repeating OCT is very beneficial, as you will see. It can penetrate through because I have the sweat source. So this, look at this, crystal clear where the ischemia is, where the new vascularization is, and where is the NVD. And also on the right side, you can see how much extensive ischemia in there, which was not clearly seen by the fluorescein because of the media opacity and the quality of the patient, of the photos, and how we can detect everything, NVEs, NVD, areas of ischemia, and we can start treating this patient based on this. Let me go to another case. This is an interesting case with OCT in I did OCT in a 65-year-old male with diabetic retinopathy. But looking at the picture, this is not only a diabetic retinopathy, we have a coincident lesion, which is age-related macular degeneration. Looking at the picture, we can see here microaneurysm. We can see microaneurysm, but there are some retinal pigment epithelial detachment, some drusen all over the posterior bone, and the patient is complaining of the right eye. Let's have a better picture for this. OCT, horizontal line scan showing nothing to be seen on the left eye, but look at the right eye. Typical cystoid macular edema. But is that quite good enough? Looking at the OCT, we have to always interpret or go deep, look at the retinal pigment epithelium. We can see there is cystoid edema, and it is explained by the presence of diabetic macular edema due to leaking perifoveal capillaries. Let me show you other multiple line scans to fulfill your satisfaction. This is through the pigmented lesion over there, which is RP hyperplasia, which we can see sometimes in long-standing age-related. Another line scan through the retinal pigment epithelium tent, which we can see here. But again, keep looking at the outer retina. Look at the elevation of the retinal pigment epithelium. Look at the thick choroid. Look at this flat and irregular RP detachment, where the RP is separated from the Bruch's membrane, which we call the Doppler cell. So before starting treating this patient, we have clearly to identify, is it only one pathology or it's a combined pathology? We said it's an age-related macular degeneration, and it looks like a dry type. But how about the cyst? Is this cyst related only to diabetes, or this edema related to CMV? Look at the OCT angio. OCT angio, this is, as we said, the superficial plexus. This is the deep plexus, and we can see there is ischemia. It's definite ischemia in the perifoveal area, plus the cyst, which can be seen by the OMPAS. But where is the outer retinal layers? Here it comes. This is the 3x3 cube, and if you look, this is the fluorescein angiography, by the way. Multiple RP detachment, leaking perifoveal capillaries, but there is some kind of hyperfluorescence inside the fovea itself, which may be related to the cystoid macular edema, but look at the outer retinal layers. It's clearly there's a CMV down there under the flat and irregular RP detachment, and probably it is really also sharing in the formation of fluid. Preloading dose of anti-VEGF, this patient was treated by Eylea, and she get flat. Look at again, the RP detachment is still there, but the macula is getting to right. And this is how we can judge if this CMV is active or not. There is an activity, high flow, there is no flow, and it's a filamentous or long filament-like vessels, which mean that the membrane is not active. Sometimes we find lesions. We should not miss cases like this. Let's move to the RVO. We all know that sometimes we don't do fluorescein for RVO anymore, but sometimes we need to know if this patient having ischemia in the macular area. Look at this. This patient had a small cyst with perifoveal cystic changes, but the OCTA can clearly delineate that there is much more ischemia at the level of the deep plexus than the superficial plexus, and this explains why the vision is markedly impaired in this eye, though fluorescein doesn't show much of this ischemia, but OCTA is superior than this. And this is the density map. You can see the foveal avascular zone is enlarged, multiple areas of capillary dropout, or we call it low flow, and how much enlargement of the foveal avascular zone at the level of the deep plexus, not only the superficial plexus, and it always explains why the vision sometimes in RVO is markedly affected, and we don't see corresponding pathology in the fluorescein angiography. What else? A patient coming with what we call impending vein occlusion. Why we call it impending? Because there is no much macular edema. It's tortuous vessels, hemorrhages, disc edema, but there is nothing to explain why the vision is 6/60. We used to see impending. We say, we follow up this patient. Sometimes the RVO is spontaneously resolved, and this is the natural course. But why the vision here is 6/60? The macula is dry. Foveal contour is there. So why the patient is not seeing well? Is it because of the congestion at the optic disc? I don't think so. Let's go to the multiple line scans, which will tell us why the patient is not seeing well. And it's clearly seen here, it's a PAM, which is a paramacular acute medial maculopathy, which is ischemia at the level of the deep plexus, not hitting the superficial plexus. There is no leakage from the superficial plexus, and this is only inside to the deep plexus, and you can see here at the level of the deep plexus, where we can see the amount of ischemia, and this is the on-pass, what we call it fern-like, which is the leaf, hyper-reflective leaf. You can see in the perifoveal and the parafoveal area the amount of patches of ischemia. So this is what we call paramacular acute medial maculopathy, which we see clearly sometimes in diabetics, in vein occlusion, and it can explain why the vision is diminished in these cases. So this is another important issue doing OCT angiography in these cases. And this is the paracentral area full of scattered ischemic patches. And this is the abbreviation of paracentral acute middle maculopathy, or the PAM, which isolated deep capillary ischemia, not affecting the superficial, only the deep plexus, and reside at the inner and outer border zone of the inner nuclear layer, as we can see here. So we can see the hyperreflective lines at the level of this deep plexus, like hyperreflective bands delineating the amount of ischemia, and it affects the vision. And especially those patients come saying that we have a central scotoma. Are you following me, Dr. Muhammad? Hello?
We are following you.
Yes, we hear you.
We hear you, doctor.
Okay. Okay. I hope I'm not going so fast. Am I?
No, it's very good. Very good.
Okay. Let's go to OCT angiography in CNV. We all know that there is a lot of debate saying that OCT angiography is not helpful in the periphery, but help in the macular area. And CNV happens in the macular area. So a lot of papers published about the identification of CNV by OCT angiography. OCTA give us information about the flow, as we can see here, how the membrane is active and has different patterns. It's not the time to explain that, but I will show you some pictures. No membrane is active, give us the criteria around the activity, and decision treatment can be also helpful by OCTA, especially in certain cases, which we will discuss in a minute. Also, it can be defined by the structural co-instant structural OCT, like the line scan, where the membrane is. Is it subretinal? Is it sub-RPE? Is it inside the retina? So this is a very valuable information by OCTA. To know if the to know if the CNV is active or not, we have to look at the OCTA. There is increased density of these capillaries. There is anastomosis at the periphery and arborization of the membrane. All these are signs of activity, and this is the density map where the flow is very high in the main trunk and in the arborizing vessels. So these are all signs of activity, and they say looping. You can see multiple loops at the periphery connecting the peripheral vessels. They give an example of this as a blooming tree, a very fruitful tree with its leaves, the green leaves, which mean the trunk, and viable leaves, meaning that this membrane is active. How about inactive? After repeated injection, what the membrane will turn into? The membrane will not disappear because there must be a trunk there. There must be a source of the membrane, though sometimes OCTA doesn't show this. But we can see here that these are trunks, like dead tree. There is no leaves, there is no arborization, there is no anastomosis, and this is when we make sure that the membrane is not active anymore. And sometimes we need to follow up patient with the structural OCT and OCTA, as I will show you in a minute. Let me go when I do OCTA in cases of CNV. Not all of the cases, because fluorescein and OCT again is quite good enough. But let's go and discuss in a couple of slides what is the meaning of non-exudative wet AMD. We used to classify AMD into dry and wet, and the wet is the exudative because of the fluid. This is a third category called non-exudative wet AMD. Where do we find that? It is discovered accidentally sometimes in the other eye of patient with neovascular AMD, like the picture in here. This is the right eye of a patient with established CNV, with cystoid macular edema, elevated retinal pigment epithelium, which is type 1, where the membrane is under the retinal pigment epithelium, or we call it type 1 CNV. How about the left eye? When this patient presented to me, I looked at the left eye and said, this is a retinal pigment epithelium detachment with a few drusen scattered at the posterior pole. Yes. And this is the retinal pigment epithelium detachment proved by the OCT. What is the meaning of silent CNV? Is there a CNV down there? Yes. Why this CNV is not giving us any manifestation? There is no hemorrhage, there is no exudation, there is no fluid in here in the structural OCT. So the OCTA is showing a very active CNV under this flat and irregular RP detachment. How come this CNV is not giving us any manifestation on the structural OCT? A lot of theories, a lot of publications, a lot of talks in the literature about silent CNV. Should we start treating this patient, though there is no activity on the structural OCT or even on fluorescein? Should we close follow-up of this patient? Treating this patient will be depending on fluorescein, OCT, or OCTA. Results be done there, but it is not giving us any manifestation. 5 years ago or 4 years ago, I used to treat these patients. And this is the patient. I gave her once anti-vision and nothing happened. The membrane is still the same. And I did another couple of patients and I found no change. The vision is still the same. There's no change on the OCT. There's no change on the fluorescein, and OCTA is almost the same. So 3 years later, only follow-up of this patient showing that maybe the flat and irregular RP detachment is increasing, but the membrane is still the same. There is no changes on the surface of the retina. There is no structural changes, and the vision is still 6-12. So most of the literature now saying we should closely monitor this patient. Give you another example. A 74 years old female patient with dry AMD in both eyes. We can see the drusen, and we can see some RPE defect, mottling of the RP in both eyes in the perifoveal area. And when I did OCT, structural and OCTA, I found bilateral silent CNV, and the patient was not complaining except of the nuclear cataract with 6-12 vision. Should we treat this patient? I did follow up this patient because I had experience, and I followed her for 2 years. She only dropped down 6/18 because of the cataract. But still, we have 2 silent CNV down there, and it is not affecting the vision. A lot of literature saying why we see this. They call it silent CNV, where the CNV is starting, or they call it different type, which we call non-exudative wet AMD. And some even of the doctors like Philip Rosenfield say it's a friendly CNV, which nourishes the retinal pigment epithelium, though I'm against this. I don't think there's anything friendly about CNV. But in my opinion, this is a very early stage of CNV, because patients with CNV only present it to us when they have complaint like visual loss, blurring of vision, metamorphopsia, but they never come without visual complaint. So it means that it could be a very early stage of CNV, and we will never know how long these patients will keep silent and when they will start leaking and give symptoms. And I have another lecture about that. But all I can tell you, this patient only discovered by OCTA. They need to be followed up closely by structural OCT and OCTA. You don't need to repeat fluorescein angiography. Any changes in the vision or metamorphopsia increasing, we have to do repeat OCT angiography and structural OCT to find out if there is a fluid, we start to inject. If there is not, we start to follow up. We keep following up. Let me go to another part of the lecture, OCTA in pediatric age group. We all know that doing fluorescein angiography is very difficult. ICG, it's impossible almost to keep the child 30 minutes on the machine, and structural OCT sometimes is not conclusive by its own. So this is a patient who was diagnosed already as Best disease, and he had recent diminution of vision in the right eye, and he could not do his activity at school. And his mother brought him in. He had Best disease, doctor, and we know that since 4 years, and we are following him up, and he was doing good at the school, but nowadays he cannot manage. And I looked at him, yes, it's a typical Best disease. And we can see the hyperreflective vision down there. And we all know that this is not a sensory detachment. This is exactly like an empty space elevating the retina. It could be previously lipofuscin deposition and cleared up. It could be the action due to the failure of the pump of the RPE. But I did multiple line scans for both eyes, and I looked at him, why the patient is not seeing? And I looked at the boy and I examined him clearly, and I said, this boy had, as I said, diminution of vision in both eyes. But when I looked at him and I examined him, I found intermittent exotropia in the left eye, which means that this eye was not the main or the dominant eye. The right eye was the dominant eye. So I looked again and I did multiple line scans on the right eye, nothing to do with it. There is no sign of anything to explain why the boy is complaining. Until I did OCTA, and this was 2016, 4 years ago now, and I found a CNV down there. Again, is this a silent CNV? I don't think it's a silent, it's a CNV. But why it is not showing any changes in the retina? Because silent CNV is completely different from age-related and myopic CNV. We don't see exudation, we don't see hemorrhage. In the complicated Retinal dystrophy's manifestation is completely different. It could be a silent, as I said, but I don't think it's a silent. It's an active CNV, and the manifestation is not the typical as we see in old age. So this is the fluorescein and OCT, the color and fluorescein, and I looked back again. How did I miss the CNV? Look at this. The circle is surrounding the vitelliform lesion, but this is not actually a vitelliform lesion. It's the CNV inside the vitelliform lesion, surrounded by tiny hemorrhage, which I missed during interpretation. So it means there is another signs we have to look carefully, because we look at the best hyper-reflective material, yellowish spots. Patient is complaining, but they always complain because of the lesion encroaching on the forehead. But this is a typical CNV. How can we anticipate that? Complaint of the patient, looking carefully at the fluorescein OCT, and I did inject that boy anti-VEGF. And again, I repeated the OCT, the structure, there is nothing there. You cannot tell from the structure OCT if the membrane is improving or not. And this is the multiple line scans, but look at this. This is the OCT. You can see the flow is getting less and the membrane is getting smaller, and we can stop injecting this boy at this level. And fortunately, we gain vision 680. So he can read now, he can work at school, and I depended only on OCTA for the diagnosis. What else you should use OCTA? In cases of chronic CSC, where everything is destroyed, we call it sick RP syndrome or diffuse pigment epitheliopathy, multiple points of leak. The patient has a chronic CSR years ago and suffering from diminution of vision every now and then. When we look at this, we will never be able to tell if this patient is harboring CNV or not, except if we do an OCTA like this. Because looking at the structure, OCT, we can see, again, flat irregular RP attachment with enlarged undilated large choroidal visit, pushing the choroid capillaries, elevating the retinal pigment. But we will never thought that this patient might harbor choroidal vascular membrane, and probably these are lipoidal choroidal lesions in these cases. And this is the polyps at the end of the arborization. So sometimes when you face with a CSC with recent diminution of vision, and you look at the fundus and you say, we cannot tell if the fluid is the cause or not, do OCTA, because some of these patients might benefit from intravitreal injection of anti-VEGF to regain the vision. Another thing, if you have a patient coming complaining of blunt trauma like this, and he is 28 years old male, and he had left recent diminution of vision following blunt ocular trauma, and he's accusing the guy who gave him the trauma that he lost his vision because of that. And I looked at him, I said, there is hemorrhage, there is elevation of the macula, and I can see that there is mottling of the retinal pigment epithelium, and I can see something leaking under this, which is expected to be a CNV. But with the trauma in 48 hours doing a CNV like this, we all know trauma can cause choroidal rupture and then complicated by CNV, but this doesn't happen in 48 hours. So I did OCT, and I found, yes, OCT and OCT prove that this patient had a CNV. Again, it's a CNV, but it is against the logic. Why CNV developed in a case like this? Look at this clearly, and always remember to check the other eye, because the clue might be in the other eye. When I looked at him, I said, what is this yellowish coloration? I thought it's because of the trauma, commotion, and it can be commotion. And here's the CNV, and here's the OCTA proof that we have a nice CNV down there with arborization and epistemology. But when I looked at and here's again the structural line scan, we can see the flow inside the CNV. But when I looked at the right eye, what is this? Again, there is mottling of the pigment epithelium. And I asked the patient, do you have a trauma in this eye? He said, no, only the left eye. So the patient was a malinger, he was a liar. And I looked at him and I did OCT, and the clue is there. It is empty fovea, disrupted outer retinal layers, parafoveal degenerative cyst, and OCTA was the clue. We have at the level of superficial plexus nothing, but at the level of the deep plexus telangiectasia, which is the cause of this RP mottling. And you can see here the perifoveal telangiectasia, which is complicated by CNV, not probably related to the trauma. And the patient was accusing the guy who hit him. And getting more and more details from the patient, he said, yes, my vision is deteriorating since almost 1.5 months in this eye. So again, we could save the ether by doing OCTA. Sometimes we do OCTA to exclude, not to prove that there is a CMV. This patient was referred to me for injection. He had a CMV in the right eye, multiple leaking sources of leaking points of undetermined source in the right eye. And this patient has 61 years old, and he was diagnosed as age-related macular degeneration wet type, and he had a posterior subcapsular cataract in the right eye. Intraocular pressure was normal, and the diagnosis was CMV, and this is his fluorescein. I scanned it, and I have it with me, and I looked at the color, multicolor, and the fluorescein, and there is something leaking down there, which starts here, and then it increased intensity and a little bit in size in the late phases of the angiogram. And I looked at him, I said, should I start injecting him? No. Let me look at his OCT. And I did OCT, and I found this. And this can be easily mistaken for CMV because it's a subretinal material with thickening, minimal thickening in the center of the macula. So it could be a CMV. But in the differential diagnosis, and I can listen to you, a lot of you saying now, it's a Best disease. Yes. So I did fundus autofluorescence, and yes, it's a Best disease. But again, can you exclude CMV? It could be an early CMV down there. So I did OCTA, and I found nothing at the level of the outer retina or the choroid capillaris, which can exclude CMV and saying this patient doesn't have a CMV. So again, I did OCTA to tell the patient that you don't have, because the patient, telling you the truth, he was already injected twice in this eye, and the doctor wanted to continue, and the patient said, I'm not improving. The patient went back again to another doctor, and we kept injecting him, and he put aside the OCTA. This was 4 years ago, and he kept injecting him until he developed a macular hole. Epiretinal membrane with attraction for the repeated injection, and he developed a macular hole. So we shouldn't inject patients for vein. Nothing can regain the vision here, and we have to diagnose CMV properly before start treating the patient, because there is a medico-legal problem in these cases. In high myopia, we all know that it's very difficult sometimes to say if this myopic patient has a CMV or not, because again, the myopic CMV sometimes comes with a minimal fluid or minimal changes at the level of the outer retina. This is the left eye of a female patient with a CMV in the left eye, long-standing CMV, and fluorescein angiography of the right eye showing a small, tiny lesion in the center of the forehead. And the patient is complaining of central scotoma, not metamorphosis. When I looked at him, is that a typical CMV? I did OCT, and it was not conclusive, because we all know it could be a scar, it could be an old one, multiple line scans, and minimal fluid. I cannot say there's much fluid in there, but look at the OCTA, it's conclusive. It is a CMV. And we should start treating this patient based on this. Here's the CMV with a high flow. It's not typical like arborization of this, because we have different pattern of high myopia, and we can see the flow inside the CMV. Another patient coming with a foveal hemorrhage, and she's a female, 27 years old. She's a doctor, a resident in our hospital, and she's complaining of left diminution of vision with paracentral scotoma, high myopia, -8, 20/60 vision. And we can see here the hemorrhage here and elevation due to the hemorrhage. Should I start treating this patient? I did OCTA, and I found that the CMV is in different situation. It is not below the hemorrhage, it's at the edge of the hemorrhage where the CMV is there. Very tiny CMV, starting CMV, and we started to treat this patient. After treatment, the CMV is getting less and less, and only 2 injections of Avastin, she regained 6/12 vision. Let me give you couple of cases. I still have time, I know. Couple of cases, and I will stop and let you think, and then we can answer the question together. Sometimes OCTA can be the only clue for diagnosis of this patient. Here's a male patient, aged 55 years old. He's hypertensive, under control. Yeah, right, recent blaring vision, 1 month period, and his visual acuity is 6/24. Fluorescein angiography, I see nothing. Everything is intact. The disc is fine. The vessels is filled, and the arteriovenous time is fine, and the vision in the left eye was 6/6. Why the patient is complaining? This is the left eye, by the way. Let me give you a bigger picture. Here's the patient, and I did OCT, and I looked at it. Look at this, and tell me, what do you see in this OCT? I'm pointing to some hyperreflective area in there. Another line scan, you can see a hyperreflective band at the level of the deep plexus, which means this patient had insult at the level of the deep plexus. What kind of insult? He doesn't have diabetes, he doesn't have, he's controlled hypertension. Why he's showing this? Another line scan, multiple areas of infarct at the level of the deep plexus. Let me give you another line scan. All the line scans showing this. So it means that he had infarcts all over the perifoveal area. And I'm magnifying the color fundus. What do you see in this color fundus? Look at this. What are these? Yellow spots. These are showers. This patient had a carotid atheroma with calcification, and these are showers from the carotid. So it means that this small emboli left the superficial plexus and went deep to occlude the perifoveal or the parafoveal deep capillary plexus, and this is the cause of diminution of vision. It's a long-standing, and he already had showers before, and he told me that he had some kind of brain stroke, but he did not had any residual manifestation. And when I did the carotid, I was astonished that he had a large atheroma with calcification. So instead of doing further and further investigation or telling the patient we don't trust your complaint, you can find out why this patient is suffering. And this is the OCTA. Look at the OCTA. We don't see exactly what we see by the acute phase of PAM or paramacular acute maculopathy, but we can see this is at the level of the superficial plexus, which is intact, but look at the level of the deep plexus. Enlarged phase, which means that most of the insult is at the level of the deep plexus, and this is why the patient is complaining of scotoma. Central scotoma, and he's not happy with his vision because he already had infarction at the level of the deep plexus, and it's a long-standing and ongoing process. Here's another case, the one before the last one, the male patient, 40 years old. I'm giving you the fluorescein. What do you see in the fluorescein here? Let me help you out. You can see areas of capillary dropout here. Probably these are infarcts. And this patient had a recent attack of hypertension, shooting of blood pressure, and 180 over 120. He's not diabetic. He had some kind of renal function impairment, and he's complaining of marked diminution of vision with a visual active 660 and the left eye was 6.9. Let me show you the color fundus picture. What do you expect in the color fundus picture? Soft exudates? Yes. He had multiple soft exudates in the peripapillary area. But nothing is seen in the central area but fluorescein. Why we are not seeing anything? Because the superficial plexus again is intact, and we cannot delineate what is going on in the central area except if we do multiple line scans again. So this is infarction again at the level of the deep plexus, and there is infarction at the level of superficial plexus, which is the soft exudates or the micro occlusion of the lateral nerve fiber layer capillaries. This is another oblique line scan showing the hyperreflective bands in here. And this is an oblique line scan passing through one of the superficial infarcts or the soft exudates and passing through one of the deep infarcts, which is the infarction at the level of the deep plexus. So this is a combined microinfarction at the level of superficial and deep plexus. And this 3 by 3 millimeter cube, look at this. Superficial plexus, yes, there is kind of ischemia, enlargement of the phase, but most of the insult is at the level of the deep plexus. Most of the infarction is at the level of the deep plexus in the perifoveal area, and this is the cause of diminution of vision. We never thought about this when we had only fluorescein angiography and OCT, and the old OCT, which was not high resolution, we could not get all these changes. But nowadays, this is another bigger picture, millimeter, and we can see here, superficial plexus is fine except of this area, but the deep plexus is markedly insulted with multiple areas of infarction, and the enfants can see the whitish patches, which means marked perifoveal capillary occlusion at the level of the deep plexus. And let me give you a wider field showing the superficial and the deep insult. The superficial insult obstructing the flow or or hiding the flow inside the superficial plexus, but this is not seen here. This is the deep plexus, and we can see how much ischemia or insult at the level of the deep plexus compared with the superficial plexus. And this is another explanation that this patient had marked drop of vision, and we have to put this in consideration when we have patients with a shooting blood pressure or malignant hypertension complaining and we don't see anything related in fluorescein angiography or structural OCT. We have to look at the OCTA to find out what's going on. And this patient had a renal retinopathy and he's under treatment. My last case, this is a female patient. She's a doctor, and I used to see her 16 years ago when she was young, and she had Best disease. I know, and I've seen her since she was almost 16 or 17 years old. She had right recent blurring of vision, and her left eye had old macular scar, as we see, and visual acuity 0.8 in the right eye, which is not bad, and 5.60 in the left eye, an eccentric fixation. Why I'm saying she's having a scar in the left eye? Because this is the picture in 2003, 17 years ago. She had developed a CNV on top of Best disease, and I didn't do anything for her until she... Why didn't I do anything for her? Why didn't I inject her? Remember this? 2003. There was no intravitreal injection at that time. So we used to follow up this patient till the natural history happens and they lose their vision. And that's why she's coming quickly with the right eye. She said, I'm not happy, I'm not seeing well. And I respected her complaint and I did OCT. I could find nothing. And I told her, I don't see anything. It's 0.8 vision, she's 6'9" almost, and nothing in the structural OCT or the fluorescein explaining why. And I can see there is a staining of the vitelliform lesion and nothing in the structural OCT. So she said, I'm not happy. I'm not satisfied with this vision because I used to see better. And I returned to her file. She missed follow-up for 5 years, but the last 5 years ago, she had 0.8, the same vision, but the quality is not that good. I did OCT, and I looked at this. I said, is that a silent CNV? Or this is an early thing? I didn't know. But it looks like something is in there, inside the vitelliform lesion. So I couldn't explain why she had blurring of vision. There is no fluid, there is nothing in there. And I told her, doctor, please give me a couple of weeks and pass by again. She said, I'm not happy with the vision. I said, I cannot start treating anything right now. But I have in mind that this could be a silent CNV, it could be an early, very early stage, because it's like a small active fibrovascular front inside the CNV. And this is a very early catch in this eye. 2 weeks later, not 3 weeks, 2 weeks later, she came in with typical manifestation of CNV, fluid, elevation, and diffuse macular edema. And look at this, the membrane is getting huge in a couple of weeks only. Vision dropped down to 0.6, and she said, didn't I tell you, I'm not getting better, I'm getting worse. And I repeated that, and I told her, now I can start treatment, because this is an active CNV. And she said, would my vision be back? I said, I don't know, but I injected her, and this is after repeated IV injection, and look at this. It's crystal clear that the fluid is gone. The patient regained 6 vision, not even 0.8. 6 vision. I don't know how, but she was happy, she was satisfied, and she told me all the blurring symptoms is gone. So sometimes we have to catch this patient in a very early stage, and I told you, sometimes this patient do not manifest with the typical picture of CNV. They don't get hemorrhage much, they don't get exudation much. Only they start to have metamorphopsia or blurring of vision, because minimal fluid sometimes can affect the visual acuity, especially if the patient is intelligent as this doctor. So this is pre and post injection, and I was glad that the patient regained 6 vision. I'm still following her up for 6 months now. There is no recurrence up to now, and she is coming every couple of months, not 1 month after that. So it's a very good point to catch a patient at an early stage and to prove it by OCTA. So my take-home message is OCTA is becoming an important tool in real-life practice, as we have seen in many cases I presented, and it's crucial in many retinal vascular disorders, when fluorescein angiography and OCT are not conclusive, as we have seen, especially in children. And it's the only capable imaging modality of revealing quiescent or silent or non-exudative CNV. We have to suspect these patients in the other eye of CNV, or sometimes they come out of the blue sky without anything except flat and irregular RP detachment. In any case like this, we should do OCTA, and can be the only clue in cases of macular dystrophy complicated by CNV, and the best method of follow-up of this patient after repeated intravitreal injection, not only structural OCT, we have to combine structural OCT with OCTA to make sure that the membrane is gone, because structural OCT sometimes is deceiving you and not telling you the whole story. And OCTA can also exclude CNV in certain conditions instead of injecting the patient of best or other form for vein and getting complications from repeated injection, so we can avoid that. And thank you so much for your listening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Majdi.
For this nice presentation.
Thank you. I hope I'm on time. I think I'm on time, right?
Thank you, Dr. Magdi.
We are more than happy because we are so enjoying with your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Fawaz want to talk with you, sir?
Okay. Good evening, Dr. Majdi, and thank you again for your.
كيفك فواز؟ خلينا نحكي عربي. كيفك فواز؟
والله الحمد لله دكتور. احنا اول شيء احنا ما التقينا بعمان رتنا ميتنج، بس اكيد الفرصه سعيده انه نلتقي بك مره ثانيه.
انا كمان سعيد بك جدا، بس let's turn back to English.
Okay. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. And again, you highlight in your presentation the importance of OCTA in assessing the diabetic macular edema, especially the ischemic element. And this is very important if you want to predict the vision of our patients if we start to initiate the anti-VEGF treatment. And also in wet AMD, especially in cases of subretinal hyperreflective material, because sometimes we need to know whether these subretinal hyperreflective material are just a vitelliform lesion or as active CNV. And as you show to us in the flat or shallow RP detachment, because sometimes these shallow RP detachments may hide silent CNV. And as I remembered 4 years ago when we gave the presentation about the OCTA, I think you and also me, we were treating those cases, but now the silent CNV, there's no need for treatment because they need a long time to develop an active CNV. And when you treat them, you may induce a geographic atrophy. Just rapidly, my question to you, which type of scan you prefer when you use the OCT angio? Is it 3x3, 4x4? And when you need to follow up the patient, you should use the same scan or a different scan? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fawaz, for the asking, and thank you for the compliment. I always use 3x3 because it's highest resolution, especially in the macular area. Sometimes I go to 4x4 or 6x6 if I find the lesion I cannot get by 3x3, though 3x3 is almost quite good enough, especially in CNV cases and PAM and all these cases. But sometimes you need a bigger view if you are detecting, like the patient with the PAM, I needed to see if the insult is only in the parafoveal area. No, it's extending up to the disc. So again, I use 3x3. I always do multiple line scans. You shouldn't count on only one line scan. As you said, multiple line scan is very important because sometimes you can miss the PAM by doing only vertical, only horizontal, and the insult is not in this line. So multiple line scans is very important. 3x3 to start with, and you can enlarge that. And I always start by 3x3 because you all know, you know that because you have the machine, you know that the 3x3 is the best. In all machines, you should start by the highest resolution to get the fine details in the macular area.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for the question.
We can take a question, Dr. Magdi, please. We have a question from Dr. Mohsen Iqbal again.
Yes.
Mohsen.
Assalamu alaikum. Very
Alaikum
nice
assalam.
presentation, Professor. Excellent. We have seen very much deep insight views of the OCT angiography. I wanted to ask that how can we distinguish between active CNV and silent CNV in OCT angiography?
That's a very good one. Active or silent? As I said, this is a contradictory. When I said it's inactive, I said there is a long filament with no arborization, no anastomosis. Sometimes you look at this and you find it the same way, and we can still say it's a non-exudative. Why? Once you found any new vascular front at the level of the outer retina or the choriocapillaris, it's a CNV. Because this area, we all know it's devoid of vessels. So once we find this, it's a CNV. So if you have no manifestation in the overlying retina by structural OCT, like fluid, like exudation, like edema, like cyst, it's a silent CNV. It's a CNV down there, but there is no exudation in the retina. So it's a silent CNV. And as I said, sometimes there is a very small line in between. You find early fluid. Is this because the CNV is getting active or not? This is why I depend on both structural and OCTA. Structural will show you minimal fluid, but OCTA sometimes would show that the membrane is progressing and the flow is getting higher and increasing in size. OCTA, and it's not reflecting what's on the structures. So it's easier to catch the progression of this silent CNV by OCTA better than the structures.
Dr. Magdi,
What about follow-ups? When should we follow up?
Yes, both of them, structural and OCTA. You should never repeat the structural alone, because sometimes I have a complete lecture on this, and I was going to give this in Amman, and Dr. Fawaz mentioned about silent CNV, what you need to know about. So sometimes you do the structure, you find no fluid, but you look at the OCTA, the size is increasing, the flow is increasing. In a couple of weeks, you will find the manifestation in the structural OCT with fluid and hemorrhage sometimes. So once we detect progression of this silent CNV, we will start treating. And don't forget the vision. These patients are always intelligent because they lost most of these patients the other eye. So once they have blurring of vision, quality is getting down, no much fluid to explain that, and OCTA is showing the progression, we should start treating these patients.
Dr. Magdi, may I ask a question, please?
Yes, Muhammad Habib.
My question is about if you have an CNV already, we are treating them. You depend on structural OCT or in OCT angiography on follow-up of this patient. Specifying the question, if you have in structural OCT no subretinal fluid, and we found the membrane, but there is no subretinal fluid or intraretinal fluid, and we have an OCTA, and the OCTA have a clue of activity. You re-inject this patient, or keeping follow-up of this patient until the structural OCT regain collecting the fluid, either subretinal or intraretinal?
That's a tricky and hard question. Okay, we all always depend on OCT in treating CNV, right? Because we have to find signs of activity on OCT, structural OCT.
Yes.
We have to have fluids, and we have to differentiate between subretinal fluid, intraretinal fluid, and sub-RP fluid. So again, the standard is the structural OCT.
Yes.
If we have residual intraretinal fluid, we should keep treating. Even on OCTA, there is complete regression. But I don't think if you do a very good OCTA, you will find a complete regression. You will find the flow in the OCTA. But again, depends, and this is a message for all of us, depend on the structural OCT, because this is the only solid imaging modality we have, and we know about it everything. We know about all the changes. So make sure that the intraretinal fluid is gone. Subretinal fluid is an issue, because sometimes we can leave subretinal fluid because of the fluid study. But again, the regaining of the foveal contour, the maximum visual we can get like 612 in the last couple of injections, and the patient is not improving. Minimal subretinal fluid can be left there, but intraretinal fluid we should not. Sub-RP fluid we are not aiming to try it. So always depend on the structural OCT, and don't go to the luxury of OCTA, because it will be costly for the patient. Sometimes it's artifact, sometimes it's not giving you the whole picture.
Right.
So structural OCT is the main thing. And I think
as you know,
this is the message we have to deliver.
Dr. Magdi, as you know, in diabetic patient, when we inject the patient, we follow up the visual acuity and the structural OCT. Do you agree with me that in CNV, whatever, if there is no gain in visual acuity, we inject once there is activity?
It depends on your regimen. Let's go back again. This is a very good question. It depends on your regimen. If you are treating treat and extend, this is an issue. If you are treating PRN, this is another issue. For instance, if you are treating treat and extend, and after the 3 loading dose, you get dry macula, vision is 6.6. Let's say maximum vision.
Yes.
6.6, dry macula, and the patient is dry after 3 injections. If you are treating treat and extend, you should inject and extend to 6 weeks. If the patient comes back in 6 weeks, 6 vision, dry macula, you will inject and come in 12 weeks. So this is the regimen. But if you are depending on PRN, after the 3rd injection, there is no fluid, everything is dry, maximum visual gain, you should stop injection and do OCT after 1 month. So
Perfect, Dr.
in my opinion, I used to do PRN, but nowadays, treat and extend, I think, is the best. Because if you wait for the patient to come with fluid, sometimes they come very aggressively with many.
I agree with you. I do a treat and extend in CNV and PRN in diabetic macular edema.
That's it. That's the best regimen.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Magdi.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank
you. Dr. Majdi, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Who are you?
Dr. Amin.
Dr. Amin Mara. Dr. Amin Mara.
How are you, Dr. Amin? We haven't met in person, but I've seen a lot of your presentations on the net, and I wish we had met in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai a couple of months ago, but unfortunately we couldn't make it.
Due to visa issue, but my question here, the internet was cutting off while you were talking about OCT angiography for cotton wool spots. I didn't hear you well. Is the infraction on the level of the capillary plexus or in the superficial capillary plexus?
The cotton wool spots is the superficial plexus, definitely.
Okay. Because due to the bad connection, I heard that the infraction on the deep capillary plexus. That's why I
no, it's the superficial plexus, and sometimes it's combined with the deep plexus. But we don't see it.
Again about that.
Dr. Amr Mahfouz.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a problem with connection.
Tofi, we are behind the time.
Okay, if you have a stop, okay.
Dr. Magdi, may we ask you to stay with us for the next session? We have a very quick session. We need you.
I'm staying. It's the longest period I've stayed on my chair. Okay, I'm staying. I'm with you. Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you for the audience. I can see hundreds of them still there, and I'm sure that the panel discussion will be very fruitful. I'm interested to hear the other colleagues' opinion. Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Magdi, for your participation and for your very informative lectures. Now I would like to ask our panelists to join us for the retina sessions. But before that, we are in the era of COVID-19. While we're preparing for this session now, I just want you to listen to this very nice music. It's done by Dr. Omar Ahmed Abdurrahman. I really like it, and I want you to listen for it just for 1 minute, just to refresh me. Thank you very much for Omar. I like it. I hope you like it also. Now let's go back again.
Thank you very much, Muhammad. Thank you very much. You hear me?
Yes, I can
Dr.
hear you,
Ahmed.
sir.
Yes, thank you. Omar is so happy with the presentation that you have presented his music. Thank you. But Omar is not a doctor. Omar is a sound engineer and he's playing violin. So that, and I think for every music he's going to produce, I will send it to you immediately. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, now our panelists, Dr. Amin, Dr. Farid, please unmute yourself, and Dr. Magdi with us, Dr. Muhammad Tawfiq. Okay, Mustafa, you are with me, Mustafa?
Okay, Muhammad, with you.
Okay, so we will start. You can see the screen now, right?
Yes.
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 Yes, it's clear.
Just want to. Just a minute. Okay. So I'm sorry because we have so long time in this meeting. I hope it will be informative for all of us. Now we will start quickly a panel session about retina. We will discuss a very important topic today, which is the management of chronic persistent diabetic macular edema. Actually, it's a new term. I just know about it within the last few months about. And let's go through this case presentation. Okay, so it's 62 years old man. He is a diabetic for a long time. HbA1c is 9.3. Presented right eye 624, that was 20, and the left eye was 618, and the OB was 19. So it's from this picture, you can see there is another product of diabetic retinopathy with diffuse macular edema. OCT, structural OCT are done for him. This is for the right eye, as you show. We have the central focal thickness of 597, and the left eye is about 609. So we have from the structure BSB scan, diffuse macular edema with some exudate presented here. So I decide to go for a monthly injection of Avastin, and we start. This is the baseline injection. Okay, and I inject him on a monthly basis after 3 months. This is the way we go for the right eye. This was 597, then go for 572. After 6 months, and for the right eye was 526. However, on the left eye it was 609, then become 522, then become 434. Now the 6 month was gone. This is what I have now. This patient have from 624 after 6 months of monthly injection of Avastin. He gave just 618. The IOB is 23. However, on the left eye it was 618, and now he gave 612 with improvement in the central foveal thickness. This is the baseline, and this is after 5 months. So I just want to differentiate and just not what was meaning by persistent diabetic macular edema, or this is a chronic persistent diabetic macular edema. Can you, Mustafa, tell us?
Okay, yeah, with you. Thank you very much, Miss. I think it is very common scenario, very common in our practice. We see patient with the diffuse diabetic macular edema, and we decide to inject anti-VEGF. And after injection, there is no response or mild response. We don't reach the point of a dry macula. You know, we can't reach the point of a dry macula. I face this cases commonly in my practice. So this is a very common scenario and good case for discussion. In this case, when we preparing for lecture, actually I review many papers and I surprising there is appendix and many informations about this lecture. One of the information mentioned in the post hoc analysis of protocol I, there's a two definition. In the post hoc analysis of protocol I found two definitions. The definition of persistent diabetic macular edema and the other definition of chronic persistent diabetic macular edema. So in this case, the response, if we have a response and we reach the macular thickness less than 250, we reach to the dry macula, okay? After 24 weeks, this is normal. This is a good. If we don't reach the 250, we have still a macular edema, but we have a response, but still there is a macular edema, okay? But not reach 250 micrometer in the central macular thickness. This is persistent macular edema. So what is the difference between persistent macular edema, chronic persistent macular edema? Chronic persistent macular edema, Mohammed, is we have a response 10% from the baseline thickness of chronic macular thickness. Okay, so if we have response of 10% of the baseline thickness, there's a reduction in central macular thickness by 10%. So we have a case of chronic persistent macular edema, but we don't reach the dry macula. Okay, if we have a response more than 10%, okay, now we can call this case, it is a case of persistent macular edema. So we can go back to our case, the right eye, we can call the right eye persistent chronic persistent macular edema. As we see, after 24 weeks, the central macular thickness is not decreased by 10%. So in the right eye, there is a chronic persistent macular edema. In the left eye, there is a response. The macular edema in the baseline, 600. And then we reach to the 400. So it is response more than 10%. There is a reduction more than 10% in the central macular thickness. So we have response, okay? But not reach the dry macula. This is called, by definition, this is called persistent macular edema. These two definitions mentioned in the post-hoc analysis of protocol I. Okay, Mohammed, with you?
Yes,
okay, with me, Mohammed? Okay?
Yes.
Okay.
So now in your practice, Mustafa, do you switch after 3 injection or 5 injection? Let's put a pool.
Actually, this is dependent on the patient. If it is compliments and it is nagging the patient, I will shift for it after the injection. But actually, the guideline and the post-hoc analysis, according to post-hoc analysis of protocol I and post-hoc analysis of protocol B, the shift should be after 24 weeks. After 24 weeks, if we have no reduction by 2%, so we can think for switch to the other anti-VEGF or switch to the steroid. What is the opinion of audience?
ممكن can I add a comment?
May I give the suggestion, please?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Can I speak? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. In my opinion, to start the switching the treatment, for me, usually I start with the loading dose. After the 3 loading doses, I assess the response of my patient. If the patient didn't get any improvement in vision, for example, the improvement is less than 5 letters, the morphology of the edema is not improved, and at this point, I suggest to switch to another kind of anti-VEGF. Most of our patients, and I'm working in a private sector, they will not waiting 5 or even 6 injections in order to be shifted. So usually when I start, let's say with a high end of anti-VEGF like aflibercept, after 3 loading doses, if I didn't find a very good response, I will immediately thinking to shift to another arm of treatment, like the intravitreal steroid implants. But if I started with another kind of anti-VEGF, like for example Avastin or the ranibizumab, and after 3 loading doses I didn't get the very good response, I may think to shift to another kind of anti-VEGF, like the aflibercept. I will give a couple of injections, and then I wait and see the response. And there's many studies talking about even when you shift your patients to the steroid arm very early, you may get a very good visual outcome, because long-standing edema, more effect on the photoreceptors, more pressure on the photoreceptors, and this will be not good on the final visual outcome. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Thank you very much, doctor. I agree with you. This is according to the patient. Yes, as I said, it is dependent and also dependent on the response. Okay.
Mungkin I add a comment?
I want to give a comment. Just we want to simplify to the audience what we mean by non-responding diabetic macular edema, because you know that most of the audience now are not all of them a retina consultant. So just we need to give in this session a guidelines when we consider the diabetic macular edema is a non-responding diabetic macular edema, and when we need to shift or to switch to another kind of anti-VEGF or to the steroid, because we need to reach to the general agreement between us. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Doctor. And if there is after 24 weeks, if there is no reduction in the baseline OCT, the central macular thickness baseline OCT, if there is no reduction by 10%, this is not response.
Do you think that the thickness? Do you think that the thickness is the important parameter or the morphology of the edema?
Yes, it is very important. Central macular thickness and morphology, and also the visual of the patient.
But for me,
both hoc analysis of a protocol I dependent on the vision of the patient, on visual of the patient, and the both hoc analysis of a protocol T. For determining the response and the chronic persistent macular edema depend on thickness, on the central macular thickness. Okay.
Please, can we go
any comment from the minutes?
No, I want to go to Dr. Magdi. Dr. Magdi, what's your opinion and the definition?
Fawaz raised a very good question. We have to define who is responders and who are not responders.
Yes.
So I don't know if 24 weeks, which means 6 months, is in plan a long time to judge. As Dr. Fawaz said, after 3 loading doses, you have to look at the OCT, thickness and structural OCT, because you can get amazed sometimes. The vision will not improve, or the vision is improved relatively to the central focal. So responder or non-responder has to be by central macular thickness. Non-responder, 10% or less is non-responder.
Okay.
More than 10%, they are responder. And there is another category, good responder or moderate responder. This has to be put in mind. This is the real life practice.
Dr. Magdi, can we add a comment, please, Dr. Magdi? If you have starting with 3 loading doses and you judge between the first scan of OCT before the first injection and rely on the third scan of OCT after 4 weeks of the third injection, and you didn't find any improvement in structural or visual acuity of the patient between the first OCT before the first injection. So in my practice, I doing OCT and visual acuity assessment before the first injection and the second injection and the third injection to justify if this patient is resistant to this type of injection or not. Because I have a patient that I am comparing from first scan OCT before the first injection and comparing the second OCT but after 4 weeks of the third injection, there is no improvement at all. But in between, you have an improvement in visual acuity and you have improvement in the structural OCT. So my message is don't do as just 2 OCT before the first scan, first injection and the third injection. You agree with me or not?
Let me tell you something. You did OCT at baseline, OCT at 1 month,
yes.
OCT at 2 months, OCT at 3 months.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes.
You find mild improvement in the second,
and
right?
third, and
the first after first.
After the first.
Mild improvement in the second, and in the third,
we have in the third we have the same OCT of the first.
So this is non-responder. Why? You said it's improvement. In my practice, I've never seen a patient who improved much after first injection, second injection, and then he recurred after the third injection. They improve mildly, but not that dramatically. If you have improvement from the first and second injection, I don't think the third injection will be the same as the first. The third OCT will be the first one.
Okay.
Unless this patient went into a disaster like hemoglobin A1C shooting, hypertensive retinopathy, renal failure, sometimes they recur very rapidly. But if you are going by the book, 1, twice, and 3 times injection, I don't think we should do. I used to do that because I have the OCT and I do it every month.
Yeah.
But in my observation, The patient who respond early, they keep responding. They don't respond at all, they don't respond.
Okay.
Sometimes I found it at the third month, much more than the beginning. Sometimes I find that the thickness was 500, it came to 540 after the third injection. These are definitely a non-responder to this anti-infection.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr.
Can I
Mehdi,
add a
our
comment?
prof. Okay. Okay.
Okay, for me, if I have persistent diabetic macular edema, I will switch after 4 injections. There is always room for late response. I have seen those patients a lot in my practice. And they don't respond at the beginning, and then they respond later on, especially for those we don't have options to inject steroids. So my goal for residents or for a general practitioner ophthalmology, that they can start always with Avast, this very cheap anti-VEGF. They can inject for 4 injections, then if the OCT didn't show didn't resolve the edema or suboptimum results, they can switch to aflibercept. I just want to add something here. I don't know why not all the people in the world are using Zaltrap. Zaltrap is the same as Eylea, identical, not similar, identical aflibercept protein, but a different upper solution. It is extremely safe. I've been injecting more than 5,000 or 6,000 injections by now. I didn't have a single problem. So it is very cheap. It's the same price of Avastin. And I do another 2 injections. If the patient did not respond, then I switch to steroids. Another go, Dr. Mohammed, when you presented this case, those type of edemas that shows that cystic pattern with or without subretinal fluid, they respond very well to steroids. But there is, we have a problem that we don't know if this patient will respond to anti-VEGF or steroids until we try the anti-VEGF, we fail, we go to steroids. Because when edema responds to steroids, that means the main pathological factor is inflammatory sequence, not VEGF itself. So I usually go with those types of edemas, intraepithelial Zaltrap with suprachoroidal triamcinolone as the first injection. I do it only every 2 months, starting injection number 0. Within 1 week to 2 weeks, I have a resolved edema. It works like magic. But as I mentioned, with cystoid macular edema pattern, those with macular thickening and those without cystoid macular pattern, they usually do not respond very well to this treatment, and I have to inject them monthly injection of anti-VEGF. And I just want to add a comment why it's 24 weeks. Why they in the literature it said like that? Because for commercial purposes to promote the intravitreal injections, maybe. But as we all know that the microaneurysms have life is about 6 months. So if we do a fluorescein angiography for a patient with diabetic macular edema, we see leaking microaneurysms, and we repeat it within 6 months. We can see those microaneurysms after, of course, injections. We see those microaneurysms has reduced in size and in number. So we have to take this into our account. Another thing I want to add, if the patient is complicated with proliferative diabetic retinopathy, then a monthly intravitreal injection is a must, whether I put triamcinolone in the suprachoroidal space or not. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Amin. Can we go to our case, Mohammed? So we have we agree with all the panelist opinion. The right eye, there's no response, so we need to switch to other option. And the left eye, there is a response, so we continue with the same anti-VEGF. So, Mohammed, what's your what are the treatment options for chronic persistent diabetic macular edema? Do you switch to ranibizumab as you start with the bevacizumab, right?
Yes, Avastin.
We start with bevacizumab, Mohammed?
Yes, I start with Avastin.
So we will switch to the ranibizumab or switch to aflibercept, or we will switch to the intravitreal corticosteroid. What you do? What you did? Sorry.
So thank you for the panelists and all my proof. Actually,
Yeah.
I start with Avastin as I show you, okay? And I usually in my practice, I usually switch after 5 injections, not 3 injections, because as Dr. Magdi say and Dr. Amin say, maybe we get improvement after the 3rd or 4th injection. So usually in my life, in my practice, I usually shift after or switch after the 5 injection when we reach to the criteria of persistent or chronic persistent. Now we discuss what are the choices that have. I start with the Avastin. Should I switch to Lucentis? Should I switch to Eylea? Should I switch to intravitreal steroid? For me, if I start with Avastin, I will not shift with Lucentis. Why? Because both of them are the same antibody, the same structure. Just one is fragmented. In our market, we usually start with the cheapest one. Actually, I think all of us will start with Avastin because Lucentis is not usually available and it's high expensive. Then, when I take the patient for 5 or 6 injections, I decide to switch for aflibercept. Aflibercept is a little bit different from the Lucentis and the Avastin because it can have an antibody for AB and placenta platelet growth factor, and it's have a molecular weight in between of both of them. So this was one of my choices. The other choice that we have to give steroid. I know steroid have a very magic result, especially with the persistent or chronic persistent.
So, Mohammed, why you don't use steroids in this patient? If after 6 injections and there is no response?
Yes, you are right, Mustafa, because I counsel my patient. Now we have to put for my patient, he's a phakic, and if you can monitor, he have a little bit high border IOP. So, and I discussed with him, he's a phakic and the IOP, and I told him that the possible risk that he may get cataract or increase in the IOP. He told me, do we have any other choice? I asked him, yes, we have an aflibercept. So I decided to take an aflibercept. When I go back to the literature, I see there is now a protocol conducted like protocol AC. They try to explain, it's in phase 2 clinical trials, they try to assess the early switch from Avastin to Eylea. At the same time, we have another study are conducted with my bro, Dr. Ashraf Sha'rawi and Dr. Ahmed Soukat, a retrospective study. They assess the early switch after 3 injections of Avastin to Eylea and Lucentis, especially when we get less than 10% increase in central macular thickness. Both groups, they start with 3 injections of Avastin, then one group give them Eylea after not getting response, the other group getting Lucentis. Both of the group have shown improved vision after the first injection. So I decided to go for aflibercept.
Very nice, Mohammed. So for the right eye, we switch to aflibercept, and for the left eye, we continue with the bevacizumab, right?
Yes. And this is the first injection. This is the baseline when I reaching the baseline after 6 months. This is after first month from Eylea. We get a reduction in the central foveal thickness, and this
very
is
nice.
In the second month. And unfortunately, because the COVID-19, we are in complete lockdown for 4 weeks now. I stopped the injection. So I need here the opinion of Dr. Magdi. Did what I do is right or no? What's your opinion, Dr. Magdi?
Telling you the truth, he did the right thing. He switched it from one anti-VEGF to another. But let's not go to the commercial thing. We have both of them available. I mean, according to the availability. But as you said, there is difference between aflibercept and ranibizumab. And you said you switch it to aflibercept. You said another study was done switching from one anti-VEGF to another, like from Avastin to Lucentis. And I do start by Avastin like you. I never start by the expensive drugs. We are in a poor country. So we start by Avastin, and I don't disagree with Dr. Amin when he said after 3 injections there is no response. Yes, after 5 injections you might find a response, and this is a good point, because not all the non-responder has to switch, but the patient comes to consult with you, should I keep injecting this? And I always shift, as you said, after 5 injections, or even sometimes 6 injections, if the patient can afford earlier, I'll switch it. But you did the right thing, you switched from Avastin to Eylea, and you had a good response, as I see, and I think you should continue that. The question is how long you are going to continue, because again, we all know that sometimes the patient will never get dry, and I think the new slides will show us different opinion. Thank you.
Dr. Mustafa, I can give a comment.
Yeah.
Yeah, would you please go back to the image of the OCT of your case?
Okay, Mohammed, go back.
Now, when you look to the OCT, the baseline OCT, usually when I look to the OCT, I can find some predictors of the inflammatory-driven macular edema. As you know that the hyperreflective dots on the OCT, hyperreflective dots of the OCT, as many mentioned, like Professor Gabriel Koskas and Professor Eduardo Medina, he mentioned that the hyperreflective dots on the OCT are the microglial cells, and the neurosensory detachment that we found in your case, actually it's a typical finding because of the trapped microglial cells that will attract more and more inflammatory mediators. So that's why when I found such kind of edema, usually I'm thinking that this edema is more inflammatory driven. So in your case, you shift to the aflibercept. It is also a very good option. But for me, in those cases, after many injections and they're showing no response, it's better to shift them to the steroid arm because they're responding very well. You will spend the time. You will get very good rapid response to them because, you know, long-standing edema, more effect on the vision. Now, regarding the counseling of your patient, it's a very good idea because we know that the side effect of the steroids, like the cataract and the glaucoma. Now, I one of the users of the intravitreal steroid implants in many of my cases. Actually, I didn't face the problem of the glaucoma rather than facing the spikes of the IOP that usually we face it in the first or second month after the injection. And most of the patients, they don't need any treatment. Now, regarding the cataract, yes, is an issue. But I think the chronic persistent diabetic macular edema, it's more dangerous than the matter of the cataract that we can nowadays remove it very easily with a phaco procedure. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Doctor. I want to know the answer of this question from our panelist. Do you think if we start with aflibercept, the result will be better? If we start with aflibercept, Mohammed and panelist, if we start with aflibercept, the result will be better from the start of the bevacizumab? Please, the audience also.
Yes. How to vote? May I ask a question? How to vote? Where is the button to vote?
There's submit. You can't vote. You can't vote.
We cannot vote as a
You are panelist.
We only can talk.
No, now you only can talk and there is no vote?
No vote for us,
yes. But just tell me where to vote from. I mean, I don't want to vote now, but where the button to vote from?
It would appear you are panelist. You can't vote.
No, I know I can't, but where's the button?
No, there is no button for the panelist. The other participants can see the button.
I see. Thank you. توفيق سألتك أنا السؤال ده وما عرفتش تجاوبني ها؟
لا يا باشا أنا جاوبت يا باشا أنا جاوبت نفس الإجابة والله جاوبت نفس الإجابة.
ماشي يا حماد ماشي.
أنا عندي الأسرار كلها يا باشا ولا يهمك أنا واقف.
ماشي.
So Mohammed, you can share the result?
Yes, the result now they say it's about 54. They say maybe 47. They say yes, maybe have a good result.
Okay, so the opinion of our panelists, Dr. Majid, if we start with aflibercept, if we start with aflibercept, the result will be better from the bevacizumab.
Telling you the truth, I don't think so, because we will never know who will work, which drug will work and which drug will not work. But in my opinion, giving you a little bit of clinical practice guidelines for me, once the patient is chronic, is not presented recently or early, I think we should start with aflibercept. But if the patient is coming with a cystoid macular edema with a minimal thickness 350, and he's saying that he's a recent history, I would start with avastin. But again, a chronicity, different behavior in the disease. Long-standing disease means there is a lot of mediators in there. So we need a stronger thing to start with. This is my opinion.
Thank you very much, sir. Mohammed, was it me?
Yes.
What's your opinion? If we start with aflibercept, the result will be better?
Actually, we in this subject we have no any evidence-based data clear, but in a post hoc analysis for protocol T, they think that in in post hoc analysis they go back to the data of protocol T. They start to analyze them. They think that in the group 5% will get improvements, and also they will show a better VA improvement and normal anatomical functions. So that's what I found. So I go to Azortex, and also I told you I don't go for a steroid because I counsel my patient and the patient refused that. So I think I would like to ask here Dr. Amin. Dr. Amin, do you think if we added Azortex, does that make change?
Yes, of course it will make change. And I think if you started with a 3% from the beginning, it will make changes, because the thickness of the macula and the baseline vision is all indicative of using a 3%. And another thing, if we use a 3%, we don't need to wait for 5 or 6 injections. 4 injections, the patient does not respond. There is no meaning of switching back to pipazizumab or ranibizumab. So we can start with Ozurdex. So we shorten the journey for the patient.
Okay, so, just one question to Dr. Amin. What's the criteria of CTO on the patient? You can determine, I will start with aflibercept or with Avastin, according to the central macular thickness, according to,
if the vision is 20/50 and less, it's indicated for using aflibercept.
Sorry, if the vision is, it's not clear, the vision?
20/50 and less. Or
20/50 and less, according to the visual acuity. If the visual acuity is 20/50 or less, you start with aflibercept. Regarding the central macular thickness, is there any criteria for central macular thickness?
Yes, as post-hoc analysis for protocol T showed, on a small group of people, of course, which should be interpreted carefully. If there is a 400 micron and more, the aflibercept will have a better anatomical results in comparison to pipazizumab. However, this did not show in ranibizumab unless the vision is 20/50 and less.
Okay, thank you very much. So your recommendation, if we have visual acuity, 20/50 or less, and the central macular thickness, 400 micrometer or more. So we will
no, need to, yes, or 20/50 is the main criteria. If we have 400 and more is lesser than it's less criteria, but it's shown in the post-hoc analysis.
Mustafa, may I ask you a question, please, Mustafa?
Yes, of course.
Do you rely in your practice in the number of central foveal thickness? Exact as every now and then you tell us the number of central foveal thickness. For me, I don't rely on the number of the central foveal thickness.
Yes, I'm agree with you. I'm always start with the bevacizumab. Always start with Avastin.
No, I don't understand my question.
No, yes.
Okay, can I ask the panelist a question?
Okay, of course.
Okay, let's to put the question in this matter. When you decide to give the patient the anti-VEGF, and when you decide to give the patient the steroids, when you look to the edema from the first time?
For me, from the first time, I didn't use this.
Yeah, because sometimes we're facing a very huge edema. Okay, as you shown in your case, with a new neurosensory detachment, and let's just say more than 500, 700 microns. So would you prefer in some cases to use like the steroids as a first line?
Okay, for me as primary treatment, I'm always use anti-VEGF. As the primary treatment.
Good and quick answer. We have to be quick.
Yeah,
we have to be quick. I have a comment. My recommendation also, first line is anti-VEGF. This is the gold standard for me.
Yes, if there is a refractory diabetic macular edema, if there's a non-response, we think of to switch to steroid. The primary treatment is anti-VEGF. This is my opinion, and I did that in my practice.
Me too.
So,
me too.
yes, but if you face the patient that is contraindicated to anti-VEGF, like the patient with recent stroke or recent MI, or the patient not afraid from taking multiple injections, and we face many patients like this in the private sector, would you prefer to use the steroid as a first line?
Okay. Can you ask? Okay.
Yeah, yes,
If there is a good reason, yes.
Yeah, okay.
If there is a good reason, of course.
Wait,
Yeah.
But we always should start with anti-VEGF in naive and
Yeah.
yes.
You are
Yes, sir.
twisting the question. You are twisting the question.
No, I'm not. I'm not.
We have
I'm not
audience. We have
Yeah,
audience. Our gold standard in practice is primary line of treatment anti.
Yeah, sure.
Is that right or not?
Yes, of course.
Everybody's agreeing on that. But twisting.
I totally agree.
100%.
If you have contraindication, this is for sure you are pushing us to the answer. But sometimes if you have contraindication, you can wait until 4 or 6 weeks to pass and start anti-VEGF.
Just I want to.
By the way, we forget, Yesley, we have central diabetic macular edema, and patient, let's say, we cannot inject him intravitreal anti-VEGF nor steroids. We can do laser. Laser will fixate the edema till we stabilize the systemic problems and we switch back to anti-VEGF. We shouldn't forget that laser is good, is a treatment, and we shouldn't forget about it. I know it's not as first line as it was, but it's still there.
Can I ask a question, Dr. Amin?
Yes.
Direct question. Do you think a patient with a 550 micron with cystoid macular edema, non-proliferative, will be beneficial from laser photocoagulation? Yes or no?
We will get but we will get stabilized edema. We stabilize the edema
depending on what?
Stabilizing the edema
depending on what?
event.
Depending on what? If it's not ischemic, even if it's not ischemic, there's no ischemia in the macula, there's no ischemia in the periphery. On what basis you would do laser photocoagulation?
Yeah. Okay. So again, because we are running,
I'm talking. Sorry. Okay. Okay, sorry. But just the question: if I cannot inject anything,
don't do anything. If you cannot inject, you shouldn't do.
What shall I do?
You should wait.
Control.
Yes, control diabetes.
We can stabilize.
دكتور مجدي في لي سؤال لك اخير للبانلست. هلا لو كانت هذه if we start this case from the beginning on aflibercept and the patient showing no response, what's the option? What's the option? Next option for you? Would you switch to another kind of anti-VEGF or you switch to the another arm of treatment like steroids?
Can I have the comment, please?
Yeah.
Can I comment?
Yes, please.
Yes, of course.
At the beginning, you had very nice comment that including the steroid at the beginning of the treatment, it will have a better good visual acuity. To make it simple, the main problem with the diabetic macular edema is the VEGF, right?
Yeah.
So the big arm of the problem is the anti-VEGF. However, this is not the only. Always with the diabetic macular, there is some kind of inflammatory process. So if we include the steroid from the beginning with the anti-VEGF, we will have a better outcome. We will, including steroid, not necessarily intravitreal. We can do septinol. This will reduce the side effects, the glaucoma and cataract. This is number 2. This is as simple as that. This is number 1. Sorry. Number 2. We have to ask ourselves one question: why this patient is not responding or is poorly responding? Switching just anti-VEGF, it might be not solve the problem. Are we guarantee if we switch into anti-VEGF, it will get a better outcome? I think if the patients have poor response, this is the time for fluorescein to rule out ischemia, and that there is ischemia, I think no sense to switch to any kind of anti-VEGF.
Okay, but if you start from the beginning on the highest end anti-VEGF, like the aflibercept, and the patient showing no response, so is there any issue to switch to another kind of anti-VEGF since the aflibercept is not achieving the goal?
You said there is no any response or poor response.
No. Let's just say there is a poor response. Okay, to aflibercept. After the 3 loading doses, okay, your patient's not getting more than 5 letters, and the morphology of the edema not changed. Is there any sense to change to another kind of anti-VEGF, like turning back to ranibizumab or Avastin, or you should shift to another arm of treatment like the steroid?
Before doing reactions, let me do fluorescein, FFA.
Yeah. Okay. I totally agree with you that we need to do the fluorescein and assessing the risk factor. But let's just say that you did the fluorescein, no peripheral ischemia, everything is okay, and you assess the patient that there is no ischemic element. But my question, when you use the highest end of anti-VEGF, according to the protocol T, the aflibercept is the best one, but there's no, or the poor response. Would you prefer to shift to another kind of arm, like steroids?
Shall we shift to the next question? Please?
Okay.
Yes, of course.
Okay.
This debate will never end because
yes.
No, because
now is the time to shift.
Last word. I mean, each case should be individualized, and
Yes.
no one from us is wrong in his management. But we think that this way is the correct one. But I think all the options can produce some kind of improvement, maybe to the highest or to the medium. But I think each case should be individualized to its.
Yes, I totally agree. Yes.
My last question now: what is the role of partial vitrectomy in refractory diabetic macular edema? Dr. Mohammed Tawfiq Hamada.
يا باشا.
حماده.
ايوه يا باشا.
حماده يلعب.
I think if you think for BBV and diabetic macular edema, you think earlier. If you think late, you will get a structural improvement with no functional improvement.
Okay. So you can hear me?
Yes,
with you, Muhammad.
Finally, when I go back searching to this, I show this diagram. He say we have to depend on many factors. We have to go for the fluorescein angiography to detect if there is a leakage. We give laser. If we have an epiretinal membrane, we go for a vitrectomy. Then we have to conclude whether the patient is a faking, non-faking. To add a aflibercept or change to dexamethasone. As Dr. Farid say, each case will be individualized. And finally, at least we get to define our definition for what is the meaning of persistent diabetic macular edema and what is the meaning of chronic persistent diabetic macular edema, how to deal with them, whether switching to each other, even if we debate. But this debate is actually, in every conference we go, the same debate. Until now, we don't get...
Because there is no clear guidelines, Muhammad. There is no clear guidelines for switching to the other anti-VEGF.
Dr. Majdi Musa, the last word for you. What's your opinion, lastly?
My opinion, let's be honest with each other. We all try all anti-VEGF, we all try steroids, we all use whatever we have in hands to compete with diabetic macular edema. But let's go back with our guidelines, clinical guidelines. We start always with anti-VEGF, there is no doubt about it. Sometimes we can start with the cheapest because we are in a country like your country, we have to start by Avastin. I always start by Avastin up till now. But if you have the option to start by strong anti-VEGF like aflibercept, you start with it. We all know that another anti-VEGF is coming to the market in 6 months and it will stay longer. But again, anti-VEGF is the first line of treatment. And I agree completely with Dr. I think Mustafa said, or Muhammad, with the posterior subtenon, sometimes it works magically. With resistant cases, posterior subtenon was intravitreal anti-VEGF. I like that very much, and I use that very much. And I use the cheap thing, which is the triamcinolone, of course. And then we can switch to, if we start with Avastin, switch to aflibercept or ranibizumab, and I always switch. And after switching, if there is no response, at 3 injections, you have to deal with steroids. Steroids as a primary line of treatment, sometimes in pseudophakic, I'm sorry, and in non-steroid responder, and I used to do drops for 1 week and see if the patient is responder or not. And second line also, it is a very good response to steroids once the anti-VEGF doesn't work. And we have to, as we said, tailor our treatment according to the patient. But the most important thing is controlling the systemic diabetes, controlling very important. Second thing, we have to know how the patient can afford continuing or not, because we lose a lot of patients because they cannot continue. But starting with the cheap one, shifting to the expensive one, if you can afford, and then to steroids. And I think partial vitrectomy has a role, but it's a very, very limited role, because as Dr. Muhammad said, you always think late of surgery. You always think late because you, running out of the options, and then you go to surgery. No way that you will get a visual gain. But if you start early, especially if you have a membrane, if you have contraindication, that will be a very good result. And thank you for the invitation, but this is my opinion, and I hope we have benefit for the audience, because it's nice to brainstorm with each other, but we have to have the guidelines at the end.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
1 minute question.
Yes, Dr. Farid.
Okay.
Just I want to ask my colleague, anyone has an experience with vitrectomy for diabetic macular edema?
Primary vitrectomy?
Yes.
Without traction or membrane?
Yep.
What would you do? Hamada, did you do anything like this? Did you do anything like patient coming out of the blue sky with cystoid macular edema, never be injected, naive patient, and you tell him go to surgery?
No.
Have you ever done that?
No, never.
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 No one.
Never.
All right. Because if you go to the...
However, there is a study. There is a study conducted for those.
Yes, this is a study. I think I know there is a study tell us about the primary vitrectomy in diabetic macular edema, but we are in a practice.
Yes.
We tell
This
about
the study concluded that the primary vitrectomy is more cost effective than injection, as the cost of injections in US, the study was done in the US, it would be within 1 year more than the vitrectomy itself. So they compare it as a more cost effective. That's all what the study said.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all my both and panelists. It was a very fruitful discussion, and I'm very sorry because it will take so much time. We are now 4 hours and 30 minutes sitting on the.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Mohammed. Thank you, Mohammed, for your effort for organization. Thank you for our panelists, for our Prof. Dr. Meji Moussa, for Dr. Farid Ward, for Dr. Fawaz, for Dr. Mohammed Ahmed Tawfiq, for Dr. Amin Marashi. Okay, thank you all for your nice discussion.
Dr. Mustafa, I would like to remember you. We have a third meeting.
Inshallah.
I would like to give special thanks to Dr. Wael Al-Jindi for his efforts. He have a daily conference, daily meeting with Dr. Wael. Dr. Wael, thank you very much for your support every way.
Shukran, Dr. Wael. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Wael.
Dr. محمد أحمد توفيق حمادة يا باشا شكرا. أنا بشكركم جدا ونلتقي على خير الأسبوع المقبل إن شاء الله.
شكرا جزيلا. شكرا.
مع السلامة.
شكرا. مع السلامة.
مع السلامة.
It was really nice. Thank you.
Thank you very much.